I always pictured my honeymoon as the cleanest happiness I'd ever known. A fresh page, a warm light, a story we'd tell each other when our hair went silver. If someone had told me I'd spend that week sprinting across a shoreline with my heart beating like a trapped animal, slick with someone else's blood, begging for morning to come, I would have said they were insane. But I need you to understand how ordinary everything felt before it twisted. My name is Elena Parker. 3 weeks ago, I married Mark, the man I'd planned to grow old with. We'd been together 5 years. It has one of those stupid, perfectly ordinary beginnings. Coffee spilled at a campus cafe, me mortified, him smirking, handing me a napkin and asking for my number like it was the simplest thing in the world. He was good at the small, steady kindnesses, patient on my bad days, able to turn a joke when I couldn't. He worked in tech and made decent money. He told me he wanted to take care of me in a way that felt like shelter after my dad died my senior year. Losing him had been like losing the floor beneath my feet. Mark felt like the only thing that kept me upright. I wasn't naive about love. We'd been through apartments with leaking pipes, nights too quiet and too tight with money, and a terrifying stretch when I thought he might leave. When he proposed in front of my mother and little sister last Christmas, I said yes without thinking. It felt right. The wedding itself was small, the kind that leaves room for soft memories rather than spectacle. The honeymoon, though, Mark insisted. "You've never seen the ocean, Elena," he said one night, holding my hands while scrolling through cabins. "You deserve to wake up to waves." He booked a week at a private beachfront cabin in South Carolina in the off-season. He wanted privacy, he said, and I wanted quiet. When we arrived, the place was stunning in a muted way. Pale wooden floors that smelled faintly of salt, floor-to-ceiling windows framing a wide, empty beach, a wraparound deck that looked like it belonged to a different, calmer life. At night, the Atlantic turned into molten silver under the moon. No crowds, no nightlife, just the long, slow sound of surf. I let myself believe peace had finally arrived. I was wrong. There were little things at first, the kind you file away as eccentrics of a place. The drive out had been through long, empty roads, broken neon motel signs that blinked like tired eyes, abandoned gas stations, miles with nothing but grass and sky. I laughed in the car. "This looks like the first 10 minutes of a horror movie," I said, and Mark grinned, that familiar tilt of his mouth that told me he liked being the brave one. When Russell, a wiry man with a cigarette voice and a way of not meeting your eyes, handed us the keys, he kept looking past us toward the tree line. "Safe enough, long as you lock up at night," he said, and his laugh landed wrong. I asked him about crows or foxes, anything. He shrugged. I told myself he was just gruff. That first night, while Mark unpacked, I stepped onto the deck with a glass of white and saw barefoot footprints in the sand, leading from the water up to our steps. They were fresh and human and not ours. We had just arrived. I called down to Mark. "Someone's been here." He squinted, offered a shrug. "Maybe the cleaner. Maybe Russell. Don't invent stories." I let it go. Big mistake. The first 2 days felt like the honeymoon we had pictured. Mornings in bed while sunlight knit itself across the floorboards. Long walks where we let the surf erase our footprints. Seafood dinners Mark attempted with a frightened, proud concentration. I posted a photo with the caption, "Living the Dream." My hand hovered over the keys and I could almost feel how right things were supposed to be. But on the third night, that quiet unraveled. We were half asleep, the bedroom dark but for moon silver leaking through the blinds, when a soft, hollow thud came from the deck, like someone dropping a log. I sat up. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. Mark listened for a beat, then rolled his eyes the way he did when he wanted to reassure me and actually reassure himself. "Probably the wind," he said, but his voice was small in the room. Outside, the air lay still like a held breath, and I felt the prickle behind my neck, the old human sensation of being watched. It wrapped around me the way cold water wraps a limb, distant and immediate all at once. I stared at the window until my eyes stung, waiting for some logic to appear. There was none. Goosebumps crawled up my arms. I stood and peered through the glass door. Only black ocean and pale sand. We went back to sleep, but morning showed greasy smudges on the glass. Fingerprints as if someone had pressed trying to look in. I told Mark. He frowned and said, "Humidity. You're overthinking." I nodded, but a small knot in my stomach didn't believe him. 2 days later, everything exploded. On the 5th night, Mark said he'd drive 40 minutes into town for wine. Back in an hour. He kissed my forehead and left. I curled with a book, the unease rising like tide. 30 minutes, 40, then an hour. I called, no answer. Midnight found me pacing, phone clenched, heart pounding. Then footsteps on the deck, slow, methodical. I froze. Mark? My voice broke. No reply. The sliding door became a dark mirror. My face looked thin, and behind it a tall shape stood utterly still. My phone hit the floor and slid away. The shadow pressed its long, pale fingers to the glass. I fled to the bedroom, slammed the door, and locked it. Hands trembling so badly, dialing 911 was almost impossible. "Wevan, what's your emergency?" a woman asked. "There's someone outside," I gasped. "Please, I'm alone. My husband—" Glass shattered. I screamed. For a frantic minute, the cabin shook with footsteps. The operator shouted for me to stay on the line, and I curled under the bed feeling like a child. Then an awkward quiet settled. A cupboard creaked. Then the smell hit. Thick, metallic, unbearably sweet. The blood smell I'd known from my father's deer hunting, but intensified until it was wrong. I crept out barefoot, heart slamming, moonlight cutting through broken glass. The scent pulled me toward a narrow door in the kitchen I hadn't noticed before. The pantry freezer. A steady drip answered me, plink plink, my fingers closed the handle. I opened it and saw Mark hanging upside down from a meat hook, his throat a clean, ruthless cut, eyes glassy. I don't remember the scream that ripped out of me. My lungs burned and everything tilted. I stumbled back and slipped in the spreading dark. In the doorway stood the man from the deck, as composed as a host, smiling as if he'd set the table. "Thought you'd like it fresh," he rasped. Then I blacked out. I woke in a trunk with my wrists bound and my head thudding. Waves pounded nearby and someone hummed off-key. I don't remember freeing myself or running barefoot down that long beach. I only remember the police finding me at dawn, hysterical and bloody by an abandoned pier. They never found him, never found Mark or the car. Some nights I wake to the sound of humming outside my window, and I wonder if he's still there, waiting. My mind flipped through memory, his grin, the way he tucked my hair, each image suddenly obscene. I remember kneeling on cold tiles, blood sticky under my palms, clinging to the operator's voice like a thread until the police arrived, their flashlights slicing the dark while I kept saying Mark's name until my throat was raw. I replay the night endlessly, hunting for a moment I could have done something different exactly. I told myself our honeymoon would be the happiest trip we'd ever take. It was supposed to be a clean break, a week away from work, bills, and wedding chaos. After 6 months of frayed nerves, fights about place cards, and guests added and removed last minute, we finally got on a plane. Just Cale and me, married 9 days, heading out of Chicago for our first proper trip together to Kansas City. It wasn't Paris, it wasn't Hawaii, but it was ours. A quiet city, good food, jazz, art museums. We didn't want flashy. We wanted peaceful. At least that's what we thought. "Kyle, hurry up, we're going to miss the flight," I hissed, threading through the crowd as a final boarding call echoed above us. Final boarding call for passengers Cale and Arya Sloan, booked on Flight 481 to Kansas City. Please proceed to Gate 7 immediately. Cale stumbled after me, one hand on the carry-on, the other holding my oversized tote. "I'm trying, okay? These shoes are not made for running," he panted. "Then why wear them?" I snapped. "You said you liked how I look in them," he said, breathless. I stopped, glared for a beat. "I like you alive more than stylish," I said. He managed a tired smirk. "So you admit I look good?" "Cale, I swear." We finally reached Gate 7, flushed and out of breath. The attendant scanned our passes with a polite, tight smile that said she was annoyed we were last. "Seats together?" Cale asked quietly as we stepped into the narrow aisle. "Yes," I said, checking our tickets. "Row 22, middle and window." "Great," he said, which meant someone else had the aisle seat. As soon as we sank into our seats, I felt it. That prickling at the back of the neck, the hollow tightening in the stomach that says someone's looking. I told myself it was just adrenaline. Then a voice behind us cut through. "Lucky guy," a low male voice said, almost a whisper, but loud enough for Cale to hear. "How'd a dude like you land a wife like that?" Cale went rigid, knuckles whitening on the armrest. I turned slightly. The man had a crooked smile, a dazed stubble, and unnaturally sharp blue eyes. He looked amused in a way that made my skin crawl. "Excuse me," Cale said, voice flat. "You heard me," the stranger said, grinning. "Beautiful girl like her and you." He gave Cale a slow once-over. Guess confidence really does work. I shot Cale a warning look. Just ignore him, I murmured. But Cale's temper was simmering. Do you mind not talking to my wife like that? The man chuckled and leaned forward a fraction. Touchy. I was just giving a compliment. Cale's jaw tightened. Stay in your seat. Sure, the man said, settling back, his smirk stubborn. I tried to pretend it was nothing, leaning my head against the window. Let it go, Cale, please, it's not worth it. He nodded, though his leg jittered. An hour into the flight, the man started again. Hey, sweetheart, he hissed, his voice sliding between the headrests. What's your name? I didn't answer. Cale half-turned. You say one more word and I swear... The man's grin widened. You'll pick a fight with me right here in front of a cabin of people? That'd be a show. I pressed my palm into Cale's knee. Don't, I whispered. Please. The flight attendant walked by and Cale flagged her down quickly. This man is harassing my wife. Can we switch seats? She looked sorry but helpless. I'm so sorry, sir. The flight is full. I'll speak with him. She leaned in toward the stranger. Sir, please respect the other passenger's privacy. Of course, he said with exaggerated politeness. Just making conversation. The moment she stepped away, he dropped his voice to a rasp. I barely heard it, but something about the tone lodged in my chest. I'm going to remember that tone, I thought, fingers tightening around Cale's hand. We hit turbulence for the last half hour. I closed my eyes and gripped Cale like an anchor as the plane bucked. When we finally touched down, relief poured through me. Thank God, I muttered while we stood to collect our bags. The man hadn't spoken since the bump started. I didn't look back. We just wanted out. Walking through the terminal, Cale muttered, Do you see him? Number good, I said, breathless. Let's just grab our luggage and go. Kansas City's small airport made people easy to spot when they lingered. I saw him near baggage claim, standing and watching. Kyle, I whispered, clutching his sleeve. He's there. Stay close, he said. We snatched our suitcase and moved for the exit as fast as we could. At the taxi stand, he was gone. He wasn't in sight. The hotel felt like an apology. Warm lighting, soft jazz spilling in the lobby, and a downtown view from our 12th floor room. For a while, everything loosened. We showered, ordered room service, and laughed over wedding anecdotes. Then around midnight, a knock sounded, slow, deliberate. Cale froze. You order something? No, I said, voice thin. He looked through the peephole. No one there. Another knock, louder this time, came from the adjoining room's door. Cale wedged a chair under the handle. Someone's messing with us, he muttered. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message read, Nice view from your room. My skin went cold. I yanked the curtains closed so hard I almost tore them. Cale called the front desk. This is room 1208. Who's in 1209? The clerk hesitated. The clerk says that room isn't occupied, the front desk voice said, flat and polite. The knock came again. Harder this time, like someone testing the wood. Cale snatched the hotel phone. Call security now. The line died with a soft click. Then the voice came from the other side of the door, slow and close enough to make every hair on my arms stand up. Open up, lovebirds. We're not done yet. Cale. I barely breathed the name as the knocking turned into a steady battering, each hit thudding through the wall like a living pulse. Arya, get in the bathroom. Lock the door. His words were low and urgent, the kind that cut off argument before it started. I ran, slammed the bathroom door, and twisted the deadbolt until my fingers burned. My breathing came in sharp, shallow pulls. My heart drummed so loud it nearly swallowed the sound of the knocks. Then something scraped, a thin metallic noise like a key dragged across wood. Cale's voice bled through the bathroom, tight, raw. What the hell do you want? The reply slid under the door and through the crack. A voice I'd heard before, familiar and wrong. You ruined my fun on the flight, the man said, slow and deliberate. Thought you could humiliate me in front of her. His tone dropped until it was almost a snarl. Now I'm going to show her what a real man looks like. A cold spike of fear stabbed my spine. I clapped my hand over my mouth to stop the scream that tried to tear out of me. Cale shouted, desperate. I'm calling the police. The stranger laughed, a low, unhinged sound that didn't belong in a hotel hallway. You think they'll get here in time? Something slammed. The adjoining door rattled on its hinges and then silence. No scraping, no voice, no further pounding. My ear pressed against the bathroom door waiting for a reply. Kale, I whispered. Nothing. Kale! Still nothing. Panic rose hot and slick. I fumbled the lock and cracked the door just an inch. The bedroom was dim, the city's glow seeping around the curtains. The chair was still braced against the adjoining door. Kale wasn't there. The air felt thick and weighting, like the room itself was inhaling. Kale, I said again, moving into the soft carpet, my bare feet soundless. Then I saw his phone on the nightstand and, written across the mirror in broad dark strokes, thick smeared letters that might have been blood, 3 words. Come find me. My stomach flipped. My hands shook so badly I could hardly grab Kale's phone from the nightstand. I dialed 911 with numb fingers. 911, what's your emergency? The words tumbled out of me. My husband. Someone took my husband. Room 1208 at the... My voice broke as I tried to say the hotel's name and floor. Please send someone. He's gone. There's blood. The caller on the other end clicked off. The line went dead. No static, no hold music, just gone. Then Kale's phone buzzed in my hand. Unknown number. Miss me already? The message felt like ice in my veins. I stumbled back, lungs shallow and wild. The next text snapped onto the screen before I could think. Want to see him? Come alone, no cops. Parking garage level 3. 5 minutes. Another message popped up. If you're late, I'll send you a piece of him. My body moved before my brain could catch up. I shoved my jacket on, shoved the phone into my pocket, and ran. The corridor was a long, patterned ribbon under humming fluorescent lights. The sound of my own footfalls felt obscene. I hit the elevator button with a trembling hand, and when the doors opened, I threw myself inside and slammed them shut. Muzak jazz played in a conspiratorial calm. The elevator opened onto cold concrete and the smell of oil. Level 3 smelled like dampened engines. Every footstep echoed and carried. My pulse screamed for me to go back to the lobby and find help, but the word Kale chased me forward. There, at the far end of the garage, a shadow stood. Kale? My voice fractured in the vast empty space. The figure didn't move. I stepped closer and my stomach dropped at the sight of a rope coiled loosely in his hands. It wasn't Kale. It was him, the man from the plane, grinning under the flicker of a garage light. The smile was too wide. He held himself like someone enjoying a private joke. Hi, sweetheart, he said, soft and deliberate. You made it. Where is he? I asked, the words raw. He cocked his head like a curious animal. You really love him, huh? He said, amused. Where is he? I demanded again. He laughed and tossed the rope aside as if bored, then raised his hand to show me something bright and wrong. Kale's wedding band winked on his palm. My knees wanted to give. No, I whispered. He stepped closer, boots thudding on concrete. Don't cry, he mocked. You'll ruin that pretty face. I backed away, desperate. My eyes snagged on the stairwell door behind him. If I could get to it, he lunged. Instinct took over. My hand closed around the first thing I could grab. A snapped car antenna lying by someone's forgotten shopping bag. I swung with everything I had. Metal met flesh with a wet crack. He cursed, clutched his arm, and lunged for me, but I wrenched free and ran. The stairwell door slammed, and the sound ricocheted like a gunshot down the concrete shaft. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs turned to lead. Behind me, heavy steps crashed after mine. The man's boots, the sound of breath too eager like a hunter enjoying the chase. I misstepped 3 flights down and slammed my hip against the railing, pain flashing up my side, but I kept going. When I burst into the lobby, the warm air hit my face. I screamed until my throat was raw. Help! Somebody help me. 2 security guards snapped to attention. One fumbled for a radio while the other came at me full tilt. He's in the stairs, level 2, he's got my husband. I blurted, weeping. They charged up the stairwell. They found the man, gone. They found evidence, a smear of blood on the railing, a trail that simply stopped. No sign of Kale, no sign of the stranger. Police descended. Cameras were pulled and reviewed. The footage showed us getting off the elevator together, then static. A blankness where minutes should have been, like a strip of film someone had cut away. I told them everything, the flight, the text, the knocks. But when technicians combed call logs and hotel records, nothing showed up. No unknown numbers, no delivery of malicious messages, no trace in the system. The part that won't let me sleep is the adjoining door he'd been pounding on, the one we were sure had a room on the other side. Maintenance swore it had been sealed for years. There was no room 1209. There had never been a room 1209. I never thought the happiest trip of my life would turn into the nightmare that still claws at me in the dead of night. Whenever people ask about the scariest moment of my career, they expect a story about a standoff gone sideways, or a house fire where the smoke nearly swallowed me whole. They think being both a cop and a volunteer firefighter means I've already stared into hell. And sure, I've seen blood, fire, chaos. But none of it comes close to what happened on my honeymoon. It began like a dream. 2 years of planning, scraping overtime shifts, pinching every cent, and rushing through what felt like the shortest engagement in history. And then Melissa and I were finally married in late June. The wedding was everything we wanted. Small, personal, just family and a handful of friends. By the end of the night, I couldn't stop staring at her. She was radiant in that dress. Perfect when she laughed at my mom's jokes. Perfect when she leaned across the table and stole fries off my plate like she always did. I kept thinking, this is it. This is the life I fought for. Our honeymoon was supposed to be the reset button, the chance to wipe away years of stress, debt, and exhaustion. Melissa had chosen the spot. A quiet coastal town in northern Brazil, far from the tourist traps, sold to us online as where romance meets paradise. The pictures hooked us instantly: white sand, endless blue water, a boutique hotel with balconies that opened right onto the ocean, Villa Marol. Even now I can remember the scent when we first arrived, the salt air laced with flowers, something sweet and unfamiliar clinging to the breeze. The lobby was rustic but elegant, dark wooden beams, warm amber lighting, the kind of place that felt both old and carefully curated. Melissa squeezed my hand so tight I thought she might cut off circulation, practically bouncing as we checked in. "Daniel Brooks?" the woman at the desk asked, her Portuguese wrapping around my name making it sound musical. "Yes," I said, grinning, "and this is my wife, Melissa." The word wife still felt strange in my mouth, strange in the best way. It made me grin like a fool. "Congratulations," the clerk said warmly. "Welcome to Villa Marol. You've been booked into the honeymoon suite." Melissa's cheeks flushed. She nudged me with her elbow, eyes sparkling. "Hear that, Mr. Brooks? Fancy." We laughed, drunk on joy, and everything felt perfect. If someone had leaned over then and told me that in less than 48 hours I'd be frozen in terror, clutching Melissa in a pitch-black room while a stranger stood silently at the foot of our bed, I'd have called them insane. That first day was paradise. We stretched out on the beach, drank cocktails that tasted like liquid sunlight, and let the waves carry our worries away. Melissa wore this plain white sundress that somehow looked like it was designed just for her. Men turned their heads, but I didn't care. I was proud. She was mine, and I was hers. That evening, after dinner, we wandered into the hotel's small bar. It wasn't much, just a polished wooden counter, a neat row of stools, a few candlelit tables scattered around. Only a handful of guests were there, mostly older couples. Behind the counter stood a man who felt not unattractive exactly. In fact, he had that rugged, sun-worn look some women seem drawn to. Mid-30s, square jaw, dark hair tied loosely at the nape of his neck. But there was something about him that didn't sit right. He was like a sharp edge hidden where it shouldn't be. His name tag read, Raphael B. "What can I get for you?" he asked as we sat. Melissa smiled. "What do you recommend?" His eyes lingered on her for a beat too long, the kind of stare that wasn't just casual. "For you?" he said in flawless English. "A caipirinha." "Sweet, refreshing. Sounds great," she said. "And for you?" he finally asked, flicking his gaze to me. "Whiskey neat," I said. He nodded and turned away. I tried to shake it off, but the way he looked at her made my jaw clench. Melissa didn't notice. She was busy scrolling through photos on her phone, humming under her breath. When Raphael came back, he set her drink down first. His fingers brushed against hers slow enough that I couldn't pretend it was an accident. It wasn't an accidental brush. It was slow and intentional. Melissa barely reacted beyond a polite smile, but I felt it, deliberate enough to register. "Thanks," I said curtly when he handed me my glass. "Enjoy," Raphael murmured, his eyes fixed on her. We sipped and tried to talk about the day, but my thoughts kept drifting to him. I kept catching Raphael watching her, not the casual look of a stranger, but as if he was memorizing her. "Do you notice the bartender?" I asked in a low voice. She glanced up, frowning. "What about him?" "He's watching you," I said. Melissa shrugged. "Maybe he's bored. There's hardly anyone here." "Maybe," I replied, though I didn't believe it. She finished her drink and flagged him for another. As he mixed it, I heard his breathing change, slightly ragged, and his hands moved with a nervous quickness when he muddled the lime. When he set the glass in front of her, his fingers brushed hers, not accidental. I decided to call him out. "Does my wife have something on her face?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He looked at me without blinking, expression empty. Then, without speaking, he turned and walked away. Melissa put a gentle hand on my arm. "Daniel, please stop. I don't like the way he's looking at you." "Then let's go," she said, soft and tense. We left the bar and walked back to our room, a tight feeling in my gut that wouldn't go. I locked the door, checked it again, bolted it. Still, the unease remained. Eventually, sleep took us. Melissa curled against me, her breath warm at my neck. The ocean murmured outside. I woke to a dark room. Moonlight spilled from the balcony and painted pale lines across the floor. The clock read 4:03 a.m. Normally, I'd sleep through this, but something had me awake. At the foot of the bed stood a silhouette, impossibly still. For a second, my brain tried easy explanations. Shadow, trick of light, but then his face caught the moon. Raphael. My limbs wouldn't move. It was like my muscles had been frozen. Panic rose hot and sharp. He wasn't looking at Melissa. His eyes were on me. His right hand twitched. In his left hand, he held something that flashed metal when the moon hit it. I tried to scream, but no sound came. Melissa opened her eyes and froze, tears forming instantly. "What?" I croaked. He tilted his head slightly, then walked forward. When he reached my side, he placed something on the nightstand with a soft clink. "A glass." "You forgot your drink," he whispered. His voice was low, almost casual. So calm. Too calm. Then he turned and walked out, as composed as if he were leaving a table at closing time. For a long second, we didn't move. Then adrenaline hit and I flung the door shut and hunted for the lights. The glass on the nightstand beaded with condensation, as if it had been chilled and waiting. Melissa shook and sobbed, and I wrapped my arms around her. Security searched. Raphael was gone. His apron, his jacket, his things, everything was left behind. The manager apologized and said they'd never seen such strange behavior. He promised action, but there was no explanation for how the man had been in our locked room or where he'd disappeared to. The hotel couldn't find him. I still don't know what he wanted. Why leave the glass? Why whisper like that and walk away? Why not hurt us when he could have? Sometimes when I wake at night, I feel eyes on me. The same patient watching I felt that night. I replay every detail, the way he breathed, the way he moved. And I wonder if one day Raphael will come back to finish whatever he started. The manager paced and offered apologies that sounded like rehearsed phrases, his hands wringing a hotel receipt. They questioned all the staff, checked cameras, and found only grainy footage of someone walking by the corridor at odd hours. Nothing showed him entering our locked room. We stayed awake the week after, and months later we still flinch at late knocks. Melissa stopped liking dim bars. I started sleeping with the light on. Sometimes I dream his calm face returning. I never imagined our honeymoon would become the worst week of my life. If someone had told me a week after marrying the person I loved that I would be running for my life, barefoot and bleeding, I would have laughed and dismissed them. But that is exactly what happened. Aaron and I met 3 years before in the most ordinary way. A coffee shop line and one of those tiny embarrassing moments that later read like a movie. I was debating whether to get a caramel latte or a plain black coffee when he stepped up behind me and said, "Go for the caramel. Life's too short for boring choices." He said it with that easy smile he always had, like he meant to make the world lighter. That was Aaron. Funny, present, and disarmingly kind without trying too hard. He had a way of making you feel seen, like the rest of the room blurred when he looked at you. We dated for 2.5 years, and most of it felt like being wrapped in a warm, private joke that only the two of us understood. When he proposed the previous winter, underneath strings of cheap Christmas lights in the park, I said yes before he finished the sentence. Our wedding was small and honest. A handful of family and friends, vows read in a sunlit room, 2 plates of cake, and 1,000 small, unremarkable happy moments. We decided to make the honeymoon the thing we could splurge on. 2 weeks on a secluded island off the coast of North Carolina, a private beachfront villa, nothing between us and the ocean. It sounded like a promise. We flew out on a Monday. The kind of bright morning that feels like a small benediction. Clear sky, light wind, the smell of jet fuel and salt mixing in the air. Aaron joked the whole way, already planning the seafood binge he promised would add 10 pounds to him by the end of our stay. 2 weeks of no work, no phones, no stress, he said as we boarded the ferry. Just you, me, and the sound of waves. I leaned on his shoulder, content in a way I had only ever been with him. The villa was better than the pictures. Whitewashed walls, wide glass doors opening directly to sand, a wraparound deck with a private hot tub, and inside a simple, tasteful interior that looked like someone had edited a magazine spread into a house. He spun me around on the deck, hands tucked under my arms, and grinned. Mrs. Carter, we made it. The first day was soft and ordinary in the best way. Long walks on the sand, a tiny shack that sold fish so fresh it tasted like the ocean, and falling asleep to the steady, patient noise of surf on stone. If I could have kept time standing still, it would have been that evening. The second night began like the first, with cooking for two and a bottle of wine that tasted cheaper in the best possible sense, relaxed and domestic. We watched a film on Aaron's laptop, half paying attention, elbows touching on the couch. Around midnight, while the house hummed with the air conditioner and the ocean filled the background, a knock sounded at the sliding glass door. At first I thought it was the wind or a branch, but then it came again. 3 sharp, deliberate knocks that landed in the quiet like a small, accusatory pulse. Aaron sat up immediately, the light gone from his face for a second, and asked, "Did you hear that?" "Yeah," I answered, throat tight with a worry that felt both ridiculous and old as instinct. We both stared at the curtains, and it took him a moment to reach the drawer and pull them aside. Outside there was only darkness and the moon tracing the horizon, and for a second we both tried to believe it was nothing more than a trick of weather. He closed and locked the door with more care than was necessary and pulled the curtains tight, his hands a bit shaky. We laughed about it later, a nervous, thin sound that didn't quite reach the corners of the room. But that sound, 3 knocks, lodged itself somewhere behind my ribs and made the cottage feel slightly too small. Morning came soft and bright and with a wash of false normalcy. Aaron went for an early swim before breakfast, and the sea hugged his shoulders when I made coffee and stepped onto the deck to bring it to him. I froze mid-step because there, far down the beach near the edge of the tree line, was a man standing and watching us. He was a small figure at first, outlined dark against wet sand, but he did not move when the surf moved or when gulls argued above him. My chest tightened and a dozen unhelpful, frantic thoughts crowded in. Was he lost? Was he a local? Had he come for directions? I called for Aaron softly because shouting across the shore felt like an admission that something was wrong, and his voice carried a lighter, calmer note as he answered back without looking toward the tree line. The man did not wave. He did not walk toward us. He simply stood as if waiting for something with a patience that did not belong on a holiday island. He wore plain clothes, hands stuffed into pockets. His stillness felt deliberate, and that cold patience made my stomach drop into my heels. I felt watched. He didn't move, just stood there silent, staring. I called out to Aaron, my voice wavering over the sound of the waves, but by the time he swam back and squinted toward the tree line, the man was gone. "Probably another guest," Aaron said casually, trying to sound calm. I wanted to believe him, but the island was supposed to be private, just 4 villas, each far apart. Still, we decided not to let it ruin the day. We rented bikes, pedaled along narrow sandy paths, took photos of the sparkling water, and explored hidden coves. Every so often, though, that same prickling feeling returned, the eerie certainty that someone was watching us, even as we laughed at a crab scuttling across the sand. That night, Aaron left his phone on the deck while he showered. I was scrolling through mine when his screen buzzed. Unknown number. "Do you like the view?" My pulse spiked and I froze reading it again. Another buzz followed almost immediately. Unknown number. She looks even better up close. My stomach lurched violently, twisting like a knife. When Aaron came back, I showed him the messages. He laughed, but it sounded hollow, forced. "Probably a wrong number," he said, but I could see his hands trembling. He blocked the number, but we both knew this was no accident. Someone was out there watching, waiting. The next day was unbearable. Aaron left at 11:01 a.m. to get groceries from a shop at the far end of the island. He kissed me at the door, whispered, "Lock up. I'll be back in an hour," and was gone. By 3 p.m., he still hadn't returned. I called his phone over and over, straight to voicemail. I even called the shop, but the owner swore Aaron had never shown up. I paced the villa in a growing panic, heart hammering when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. This time at the front door. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the kitchen knife I grabbed. I edged toward the window and peeked through the side pane. No one, just a small white envelope resting on the porch. Inside, a single Polaroid. My stomach plummeted. It was Aaron, tied to a chair, mouth duct-taped, eyes wide with terror. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment I couldn't move, couldn't even scream. What happened in the next 24 hours is a blur. I called the villa's emergency number. Nothing. I tried 911, no signal. Whoever had taken him knew exactly what they were doing. Then the texts came again. Unknown number. Run. I didn't hesitate. The lights went out, plunging the villa into complete darkness. When I looked out the window, I saw them. 3 men in black clothing moving toward the house, deliberate, silent. My heart nearly stopped. I gripped the knife tighter, bolted out the back door, and ran into the trees. Bare feet cut on sharp rocks and roots, but I didn't care. Behind me, their steps pounded, voices shouting commands that made the air vibrate with menace. I ran blindly, lungs burning, until I stumbled onto the small dock at the far side of the island. A single fishing boat bobbed in the shallow water. Without thinking, I jumped in, untied it, and shoved off with every ounce of strength. By the time the boat carried me far enough from the shore, I dared to look back. They were standing on the dock, unmoving, and one of them smiled slowly, raising a hand in a mocking wave. I reached the mainland the next morning. Half-conscious, parched, and trembling, I was found by the Coast Guard. I told them everything: the villa, the men, the Polaroid of Aaron. They searched the island thoroughly but found nothing. No sign of Aaron, no trace of the men, no villa. The sand was just empty shoreline, washed smooth by waves. They said I must have been confused, hallucinating, or traumatized. But I know what I saw. I know what happened. It's been 2 years. Aaron is still missing. His family held a memorial last summer. People tell me to move on, but I can't. Sometimes late at night, my phone buzzes with messages from the same unknown number. The last one came just yesterday. Unknown number. You still look even better up close. My hands shook as I read it, the blood in my veins running cold, and I felt again that same dread. Someone, somewhere, still watching. I never thought my wedding day could feel that flawless. I wasn't the kind of girl who grew up cutting out bridal dresses from magazines or daydreaming about bouquets and slow dances. I was grounded, practical, too practical sometimes. But then Ethan Carter walked into my life, and suddenly all the things I used to roll my eyes at started to matter. It was a rainy Thursday when it happened. My day had been brutal. My laptop crashed during a deadline, my boss chewed me out for something I hadn't even done, and I was one bad comment away from falling apart. I ducked into this little coffee shop downtown just to keep myself moving. Ethan was standing in front of me in line, wearing a dark gray coat, hair damp from the rain, and a tired but boyish smile that somehow made him look alive instead of worn down. When the barista told him they were out of oat milk, he turned, caught my eye, and said, "You look like someone who makes good choices. Should I risk regular milk and hate myself later? Or go black and hate life immediately?" I couldn't help it, I laughed. That one sentence cut through the weight of my day like it wasn't even there. "Go black," I told him, smirking. He ordered, paid, and before I even realized what was happening, we were sitting at a corner table together. Two strangers who didn't feel like strangers at all. Ethan had this calm way about him, listening closely, nodding, those pale blue eyes fixed on me like what I said actually mattered. I told him about my obsession with old movies and road trips. He told me he worked in finance, loved hiking, and swore cilantro was the devil's herb. That was 2 years ago. 6 months of dating slipped into a year, and then came the proposal. Not some over-the-top spectacle, but a quiet evening at the pier where we'd shared our first kiss. No audience, no fireworks, just us, a soft ocean breeze, and Ethan dropping to one knee with a ring glinting against the dark sky. My yes was instant, easy. Everyone adored him. My parents treated him like family, and my friends teased me for landing the perfect guy. He was thoughtful, patient, never raised his voice. He helped plan every detail of the wedding, right down to the color of the napkins, and on the big day everything felt aligned, as if the universe had been waiting for us to get it right. When I walked down the aisle on my father's arm, Ethan's face broke into tears, not polite, camera-friendly tears, but raw, unguarded emotion. He whispered, "I love you," before kissing me. And in that moment, I believed him completely. If someone had leaned in and told me that within 48 hours I'd be fighting for my life, I would have laughed. "I've got the honeymoon handled," Ethan said a week before the wedding, leaning casually against the kitchen counter while I scrolled resorts on my phone. "Seriously? I thought we were picking together," I teased. He grinned. "Just pack light and trust me." I loved surprises, so I let him take control. He booked everything: flights, car rental, hotel. All I had to do was show up. The morning after the wedding, still dizzy from champagne and late-night dancing, Ethan drove us to the airport. "Where are we going?" I asked, half expecting him to slip up. He just kissed my forehead. "Patience, Mrs. Carter." The name made my heart swell. Mrs. Carter. When we landed in Denver, I squealed. "Colorado? You're kidding!" He laughed, slipping an arm around my waist. "You always said you wanted to see the Rockies." We rented a sleek black SUV and started west. Snow-capped peaks rose in the distance, sharp and unreal, like something painted onto the horizon. I leaned out the window for pictures while Ethan queued up a playlist, humming along between jokes about us buying a mountain cabin someday. For 2 hours, it was perfect. He held my hand at stoplights, teased me for singing off-key. But slowly, something in his tone shifted. When I asked where we were staying, he brushed it off. "What is it, a treehouse? A ski lodge?" I teased. "You'll see," he said flatly, not matching the warmth in his earlier voice. By the time we left the highway, the sun was slipping behind the trees. The GPS had cut out half an hour earlier, and the 2-lane road wound endlessly through walls of dark pine. "Ethan, are you sure this is the right way?" I asked, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. "Positive," he said without glancing at me. Finally, we turned onto a gravel driveway that seemed to stretch forever. I leaned forward, expecting some rustic lodge with twinkling lights, maybe a cozy cabin tucked in the trees. But what rose at the end of the drive made my stomach knot. A mansion, vast, isolated, modern, towering glass windows reflected the last light of day, and a wide wraparound deck stretched across its front like something out of a billionaire's weekend retreat. "Wow," I said softly, forcing my mouth into a smile even as unease crept beneath my ribs. It felt obscene. Ethan said nothing. He shut the engine off, climbed out, and unloaded the bags without a word. I forced a laugh. "Ethan, are we allowed to be here?" I asked. "It's ours," he answered simply. I blinked. "What do you mean, ours?" He didn't respond, and a cold prickling crept along my skin. Inside, the house was immaculate. High ceilings, marble floors, and walls of glass opening onto dark pines. A man in a black suit emerged from a side corridor. Thomas, the staff. "Welcome, Mrs. Carter," he said smoothly. My stomach dropped. "Who are you?" I asked. "Staff," Ethan said flatly. "This is Thomas. He'll take care of you." "Take care of me." My voice cracked. "Ethan, what is this? We never talked about moving." He struck me then, quick, hard, and pain exploded across my cheek. I staggered back, hand to my face. "Ethan, what?" I breathed. "You're my wife," he hissed, voice low. "You do what I say. From now on, you belong to me." The words didn't fit the man who had cried at our wedding. When he grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise and dragged me down a hall, the life I thought I knew shattered. The door to the room he shut me in looked like a guest bedroom, but the heavy bolt on the door made it clear it was a prison. I screamed until my voice failed and pounded the wood until my hands ached. My phone was in the car. No one knew where I was. I clung to memories. Note stuck on the fridge, a crooked joke in my lunch, the way he folded my sweater. Those small rituals had made ordinary days feel safe, and in that locked room I pressed them to my chest like a talisman. But memory became a torment. Every gentle gesture stood in cruel contrast to the man sitting outside my door. In the quiet, I replayed conversations, trying to find when the axis tilted. What conversation, what choice flipped him into someone I didn't know? The more I searched, the less I found. I made plans the way a tired person stitches a wound, carefully, half-blind, holding breath. I counted tiles and listened for footsteps, trying to learn the house's rhythms. I timed Thomas's appearances by the sound of his shoes, noted the creak in the second stair, the soft thunk of doors closing. Little patterns became maps. I talked to myself in whispers until my voice ran out. "You're not helpless," I said to dim reflection in the glass, and as my limbs trembled, I tried to believe it. Hours later, the door opened. Ethan walked in with a calm so casual it felt staged. He sat and said, "You'll learn, Claire. This is where you'll live now with me. Forever." I whispered, "Please, Ethan, don't do this." He smiled and left. I cried until my body shook. When Thomas brought a tray, I managed a hollow "thank you" and slid a small knife under the mattress the moment the footsteps receded. If Ethan expected me to be helpless, he was wrong. He returned with another man, tall, broad-shouldered, with ice-cold eyes. Ethan's laugh was harsh. "Thought we'd have some fun, sweetheart," he said. They started kissing, clothes falling. My stomach turned. When Ethan reached for me, I reacted. My knee rose hard and he doubled over with a strangled sound. I grabbed the knife and pressed it to his throat. "Move," I cried. "And I will kill you." His companion froze. I ran. My feet slapped marble as I tore through the house, heart pounding until I saw the rental keys on a console. Footsteps thundered behind me, but I didn't look back. The night air burned my lungs when I reached the SUV. I fumbled the keys, started the engine just as Thomas reached the doorway, shouting. Gravel flew as I floored it, trees whipping past like hands. I didn't stop for the gate. I drove until exhaustion blurred my vision and arms turned to lead, until the sodium light of a 24-hour station finally steadied me and I collapsed, sobbing. The police couldn't find the mansion, not once. The place seemed to disappear into the woods. Ethan's accounts were emptied. His phone was dead. Friends said they hadn't heard from him. Sometimes at night I think I see a black SUV across the street. I don't answer the door anymore. I keep a knife under my pillow because Ethan promised me forever, and in the hollow left behind, a small part of me still believes him. I always thought honeymoons were supposed to be the happiest time of your life. That's what everyone said. That's what magazines promised and what every cheesy rom-com showed. Two people sipping cocktails on white sand beaches, watching the sun sink into the ocean. Hands intertwined like nothing could ever go wrong. My reality turned out different. When Ethan and I got married, I thought everything had finally clicked into place. We'd been together 4 years, endured months of long distance while he worked out of state, and finally said our vows in a small Texas ceremony. Nothing extravagant, just friends, family, and a rented barn strung with fairy lights. People kept telling us we were the perfect couple, and I believed them. Ethan wasn't overly romantic, not the type to sweep me off my feet with flowers or surprise getaways, but he was steady, practical, the kind of man who made lists for groceries and paid bills before they were due. After years of chaotic breakups and heartbreak, that steadiness felt like a blessing. The honeymoon was his idea. "You deserve something special," he said one night, pulling brochures from the drawer of his desk. He slid one toward me. "How about Denver? We could drive through the mountains, quiet, scenic." I'd always pictured something tropical, but Ethan hated beaches. And honestly, the photos he showed me, towering Rockies, glassy lakes, cabins tucked between pines, looked peaceful. I thought, what could possibly go wrong in the mountains? We landed in Denver late afternoon. The sun was sinking low, staining the skyline gold. Ethan rented a silver SUV and loaded our suitcases into the back while I updated Instagram with a smiling airport photo. First day of forever begins now. Honeymoon vibes. Ethan didn't care for social media. He hated when I posted couple photos. "Why?" I asked once. He'd only shrugged. "I just like privacy." That first night, we stayed in a boutique hotel downtown. Dinner was at an upscale Italian place, the kind with tiny plates and overpriced wine. Ethan ordered for me like always. Steak for him, seafood for me. "You excited for tomorrow?" he asked over dessert, his spoon dragging slowly through the creme brulee. "Definitely. Can't wait to see those mountains." He smiled, but his eyes didn't match. I told myself it was the flight, the long day. The morning air was crisp, pale sunlight pouring between glass towers as we grabbed coffee, checked out, and hit the road. The Rockies rose in the distance, jagged like broken teeth. The farther we drove, the weaker the cell signal got until my phone was nothing but dead bars. Pines crowded the road, and every few miles a warning sign appeared. "No gas next 50 miles. "Feels like the middle of nowhere," I said, half joking. "That's the point," Ethan grinned. His eyes locked on the asphalt. Hours later, hunger pulled us off the road at a squat diner. Its paint peeling, neon sign flickering. "Eats." The place reeked of burnt coffee and bacon grease. I excused myself to the bathroom while Ethan ordered. On my way back, I noticed a man watching me from the corner booth. Mid-40s, scruffy beard, baseball cap pulled low. His gaze stuck to me, sliding slow and deliberate like oil spreading across water. When I sat down, Ethan's brow furrowed. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I lied, forcing a smile. We ate fast, barely talking. As we left, I glanced back. The man was still watching. By late afternoon, we reached the cabin Ethan had booked. A rustic A-frame perched high on a hill, surrounded by endless forest. No neighbors, no cars, just the sigh of wind through pines. "It's beautiful," I whispered, stepping inside. The air smelled of cedar and faint dust. A stone fireplace took up one wall. A plaid blanket was tossed across the couch, and a narrow spiral staircase wound up to the loft bedroom. Outside, the deck overlooked a steep ravine that dropped into shadow. While I unpacked, Ethan checked his phone, frowning. "No signal," he muttered. "Figures, that's fine. Unplugging was the point, right?" I teased, but Ethan's face held something I couldn't name. We cooked pasta and opened a bottle of wine, and for a little while the cabin felt ordinary. We joked over a card game by the fire, then collapsed into bed. I fell asleep to the wind scraping branches against the siding like fingernails. A sound woke me, a soft creak like a floorboard settling under weight. I sat up. "Ethan?" I whispered. He rolled over. "What is it?" "I heard something outside." He listened. "Probably an animal," he said, pulling me close. "Go back to sleep." I tried, but the sensation of being watched sat at the base of my skull. The next morning I found boot prints in the dirt by the deck. Too large for my slippers, heavier than Ethan's sneakers. "Were you out here last night?" I asked. "No, why?" He came to look. I showed him the prints and he frowned, then shrugged. "Must be some groundskeeper. Places like this always do." But we hadn't seen a soul for miles and the idea didn't sit right. While Ethan chopped wood out back, I thumbed through the guest book and noticed the last entry had been months ago. No mention of anyone checking lines. Then I saw him through the window at the tree line. The man from the diner, half hidden in shadow, just staring. "Ethan," I called. He came running, but the man was gone. That night I begged him to leave. "I don't feel safe. Can we go back to Denver? Please." Ethan rubbed his forehead. "Holly, you're overreacting. We're in the mountains. People hike, wander." I tried to explain the watchful way the man had looked, the prints, the timing. His jaw hardened. "Drop it," he said, and his voice turned something cold inside me. Hours later, muffled male voices drifted up from outside. I crept to the window and saw Ethan on the deck, talking to the man from the diner. Before I could move, the door exploded inward. Rough hands seized me. A cloth pressed to my mouth and the scent of chemicals made my eyes water. Darkness closed in. The cloth smelled of solvent and something sweet, like roses and bleach. My mind floating between panic and a numb curiosity as the world narrowed to the press of hands and the thud of pulse. I woke in the back of a truck, wrists taped, headache blooming. In front were two silhouettes, Ethan driving, the stranger beside him. Panic scorched me. "Ethan? What's happening?" My voice came out small. He didn't look back. "I'm sorry, Holly," he said. "You weren't supposed to wake up." Those words cut deeper than any blow. The steady man I'd married had another life, gambling debts and people who don't let you walk away. He'd married me for savings and life insurance, he whispered. "They'll make it quick." His voice trembled. I screamed, clawed, begged. I thrashed until my throat was raw, but the truck kept moving. When they pulled off onto a dirt track, something animal inside me took over. The stranger yanked me out and I fought, kicking, twisting, teeth sinking into his forearm. He howled, loosening his grip long enough for me to run. Brambles tore my skin, the cold air burned my lungs. Shouts exploded behind me. A gunshot cracked the dark. I didn't stop. By some thread of luck, I reached a highway and flagged down a trucker. 8 months have passed. I live under another name now, in another state. I chain my days to routines and never go out after dusk. Every unexpected sound, every creak still sends my heart racing. Most people think I'm dead, including Ethan. The police never caught him. If he ever knew I was alive, I don't want to imagine what would happen next. I never thought my honeymoon would become the kind of nightmare people whisper about in half voices, afraid the story itself might follow them home. When I pictured this chapter of my life, I saw soft waves rolling onto white sand, champagne glasses clinking under a golden sunset, and long, slow mornings tangled in each other's arms. Every love story insists your wedding day is the happiest of your life, but no one ever warns you what happens if you marry the wrong person. My name is Maya, and just over 2 months ago, I married Aaron Bennett, the man I swore was my soulmate. We met in a way that felt pulled from a film reel. It was late spring. I'd stumbled into this small coffee shop after a brutal work meeting, bone-tired and irritated, juggling my laptop bag and a steaming cup when the lid slipped. The burn of hot coffee splashed against my hand and I almost dropped everything, until a steady grip caught my arm. "Whoa, careful there," a voice said. I looked up and saw him smiling down at me, green eyes holding a strange intensity, like he was memorizing me. His smile was warm enough to melt away the sharp edges of my day. We ended up talking for 2 hours, time sliding by as if we'd known each other for years. Within a week, we were inseparable. "You're everything I didn't know I was looking for," he told me once. For the first time in years, I felt seen. So when he proposed 3 months later, beneath a sky streaked orange and pink, I said yes without a flicker of hesitation. Everyone told me it was too fast, but love makes you deaf to reason. Our wedding was small, just close friends and family. Walking down the aisle, my heart swelled so full it hurt. Aaron looked perfect in his charcoal suit. When he said "I do," it felt like the world itself paused. But looking back now, there were signs. Subtle, small things I brushed aside. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. His palms were clammy when he held my hands. And when the pastor said, "You may kiss the bride," he pressed his lips to mine quickly, almost reluctantly, as if embarrassed. I laughed it off, telling myself he hated public affection. The real unease began later. We'd been planning our honeymoon to Hawaii for weeks. I'd already packed swimsuits and sundresses, already pictured us walking barefoot on black sand. But on our wedding night, Aaron leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. "Baby, slight change of plans. We're not going to Hawaii anymore." I half laughed, thinking he was teasing. "What? Why?" "Something came up," he said tightly. "But trust me, this will be better. Once-in-a-lifetime stuff." I pressed him for answers, but he only kissed my forehead and whispered, "You'll love it. I promise." The next morning, instead of boarding a plane to Honolulu, we sat at JFK clutching tickets to Naples, Italy. "Italy?" I blurted, staring at him. "Aaron, how? When?" "Why didn't you tell me?" That same quick, too-tight smile crossed his face. Wanted it to be a surprise. "You like surprises, right?" His tone wasn't playful, but Italy sounded romantic, and I wanted so badly to believe in us. I pushed down the unease and boarded the plane. The flight was long. I dozed off for most of it, waking only when Aaron nudged me gently as the wheels screeched against the runway. Outside, Naples shimmered under the afternoon sun, alive with scooters buzzing past and voices echoing off stone streets. I reached for his hand as we walked toward baggage claim. He pulled away. "You're making this harder for me," he muttered under his breath. I froze. "Making what harder?" He didn't answer. He just kept walking, faster now. By the time we stepped outside, a sleek black Mercedes limousine waited at the curb. 2 men in dark suits stood beside it, their faces blank behind mirrored sunglasses. "Wow," I said, forcing a light laugh, trying to mask the tightening in my chest. "You really went all out, huh?" Aaron didn't answer. One of the men reached for the door and opened it with a practiced, polite motion. "Senor Bennett," he said in a thick Italian accent, the words clipped and formal. The air in the car felt suddenly heavy, like the press of a storm cloud settling over my chest. The men spoke quickly between themselves in Italian. It was a river of sounds I didn't understand, but a single word caught me. Razza. Girl. The small translation slammed into me like cold water, and I told myself it meant nothing. It was nothing. Aaron sat rigid beside me, his jaw align, his hands clenched in his lap. He stared out the window as if the passing buildings were a shield. I reached for him again. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice small. "You'll see," he murmured. His voice was flat, drained of the warmth that had wrapped us for months. We drove for almost an hour, the city noise melting away into winding roads and low, rolling hills dotted with cypress trees. The car moved through villages that smelled of lemon and dust, Fields slid by in a green blur. My stomach knotted tighter with every mile. When the gates opened onto the property, I could hardly breathe. It was the sort of place people use when they want to believe in fairy tales. A sprawling villa of honey-colored stone, wisteria spilling down the walls and a fountain in the courtyard sending its steady silver breath into the warm air. For a moment, I let myself be dazzled. "Oh my God," I whispered, hand to my mouth. "Aaron, this is beautiful." He gave me a thin, forced smile. "Yeah," he said, but it didn't reach his eyes. A man in a dark suit took our bags and ushered us inside. The foyer smelled of polished wood and lemon oil. Sunlight slanted through high windows, painting patterns on the tile. For a sliver of a second, I imagined maybe I'd been reading his behavior wrong. Maybe this really was the most elaborate surprise. Then a voice boomed down the marble staircase, heavy and theatrical. Ah, finally. A short, stocky man descended, 2 others shadowing him like bodyguards. He wore an immaculate white suit and a gold chain that flashed when he turned. His smile was broad, almost congratulatory, but his eyes were cold, predatory. He looked at Aaron, then at me, as if appraising a purchase. "Welcome to my home," he said in intentional, smooth English. "Mr. Bennett and—" His gaze slid to me. "Bissima." Aaron's hand twitched at his side. "This is her," he said, as if reciting a line he'd been rehearsing. "This is her?" The sentence tumbled out of me, disbelief sharpening into a thin panic. My voice came out higher than I meant. The man came closer, slow, feline, and took my hand with a ceremony that made my skin crawl. He kissed my knuckles lightly, then lifted my fingers to his lips like a man showing off a trophy. "Such beauty," he breathed. "You will do nicely." "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, jerking my hand free. My heart felt like an animal in my ribs. The man laughed softly, amused. "Ah, you did not tell her," he said to Aaron. A sharp sound, a tiny scolding, left Aaron's mouth. He wouldn't face me. He swallowed as if the motion hurt. I had to," he said, the words tumble and broken. "They were going to kill me. This was the only way. Tell me what." My voice shook. Everything inside me sank cold, metal, and awful. The short man clapped his hands together, delighted. He explained it like a story, a grotesque fairy tale told with a gentleman's smile. "Your husband came to me," he said. "He wanted wealth, power, and to join my familia. I said, bring me something precious. Bring me the woman you love." And he did. The room tilted. For a second, the tiles under my feet seemed to give. Aaron met my eyes and there was no apology there, only a look I had no name for. Resignation, calculation, shame folded into something that told me whatever love remains between us had died a while ago. "I'm sorry," he whispered. The words were small, useless. The man's smile widened with the pleasure of control. Then, without preamble, he pulled a small pistol from his jacket like he'd been expecting applause. There was a single, sharp report, and Aaron collapsed as if the world had unmade him in one motion. Blood fanned out beneath his head. The metallic smell hit me full and immediate. I screamed, a sound so raw it scraped my throat, and I could hear it echo off the vaulted ceilings. The man stepped over Aaron's body as if stepping over a shadow. He dabbed the gun on a handkerchief with the same absolute calm you reserve for cleaning your glasses. "Do not cry, Bella," he said, voice smooth, almost gentle. "He betrayed you. A man like that does not deserve your tears." He reached out and tilted my chin with his fingers, eyes looking at me like someone settling an account. "You are mine now," he said. "No," I stammered. I tried to back away, but my legs felt like putty. "You can't—" He snapped his fingers and the 2 guards closed in. Their faces were masks. Their hands were steady. The man's voice dropped to a soft croon as they guided me down a long, dim corridor. Doors lined the hallway, shut tight, each one promising something unspeakable. Light from the windows fell in long bars across the floor, like bars of a cage. As they dragged me past those closed doors, past the fountain's distant murmur and the last bright slice of afternoon in the courtyard, a cold clarity settled into my bones. The honeymoon I had imagined. The warm waves, the champagne, the lazy mornings, and had never existed. What began as our supposed beginning had been a carefully staged end. I never thought the happiest chapter of my life could unravel into something that would leave me questioning reality itself. My name is Emily Carter, and just this past June I married Daniel. The man I was certain loved me more than anything. We'd been together almost 4 years before making it official, and if there was one thing I knew with absolute certainty, it was that his heart belonged entirely to me. Mine belonged to him just as completely. Our wedding wasn't some extravagant affair. Neither of us cared for the spectacle of big ceremonies or the stress of planning them. Instead, we poured most of our savings into the thing that mattered most to us, our honeymoon. 2 weeks in a secluded beach house along the coast of North Carolina. Just the two of us, the ocean and time. When we first arrived, it felt unreal, like we had stepped into a postcard. The beach house stood with wide glass windows that swallowed in the ocean view. White curtains fluttered in the salty breeze like something out of a movie. Every corner of the place whispered serenity. The balcony that overlooked rolling waves, the endless hush of the tide, the pale sand stretching as far as my eyes could follow. I remember breathing it all in and thinking, this is it. This is heaven. The first 2 days were flawless. We spent long hours stretched out on the warm sand, bodies tangled, laughter spilling between us like it could never run out. We ate seafood so fresh it felt like it had been pulled from the ocean just for us. At night, we loved each other with a feverish kind of passion that only newlyweds know. Raw, reckless, unrestrained. At one point, lying tangled in Daniel's arms with the waves crashing in the distance, I whispered, "If this is what marriage feels like, I never want it to end." But everything shifted on the third morning. Daniel woke before me. When I blinked awake, I saw him perched at the edge of the bed, phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and measured. It wasn't like him to take calls so early, especially not on this trip. "Everything okay?" I asked groggily, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. He turned toward me and smiled a little too quickly. "Yeah, just something at work. Nothing big. I might have to hop on a call for a bit." My chest sank a little. "Work on our honeymoon?" I tried not to let the disappointment color my voice. "How long?" "An hour. Maybe 2. He shrugged, casual. "Why don't you head down to that cafe you liked yesterday? Grab some brunch. I'll meet you after." I studied him for a second. Daniel's job as a corporate consultant could be demanding, but he'd always been careful about drawing lines between work and personal life. Still, I didn't want to sour the morning, so I let it go. "Okay," I said softly. I showered, slipped into a light sundress, and walked down the beach, sand clinging cool to my toes. The cafe sat tucked just off the boardwalk, quiet except for the gulls overhead and the steady pulse of the tide. I ordered an omelet and iced coffee, pulling out my phone to scroll through the photos we'd taken so far. Our sunburned smiles, Daniel's goofy poses, the glow in my own face. I felt warm, weightless in love. And then Daniel walked through the door. My heart leapt. "Babe?" I blinked, confused. "You're done already?" He grinned, eyes flashing with that mischievous spark I'd fallen for years ago. "Couldn't stay away from you." Sliding into the booth, he kissed my cheek, leaned close, and whispered, "Actually, I was thinking of something more exciting than brunch." I laughed, cheeks burning. "Here?" His smirk deepened. "Come with me." Before I could process it, his hand slipped into mine, tugging me toward the back of the cafe, straight into the small restroom. My pulse hammered, not just with shock but with adrenaline. It wasn't like us, but something about the recklessness, the spontaneity. It made me feel alive. I won't give every detail, but what happened was urgent, fevered, unforgettable. When we finally stepped out, I caught the waiter's look, something between judgment and disgust, that made heat crawl up my neck. Mortified, I slapped a 50 on the table. "Keep the change," I muttered, before Daniel tugged me out into the sun. "I still have a little work to finish," he said lightly, brushing it off. "Go enjoy the beach. I'll catch up in a bit." I frowned. "Why'd you come all this way just to leave again?" He just kissed me quick and said, "Trust me, Em. Later." It was odd, but I let it slide. The giddiness from what we'd just done drowned out my questions. I strolled the shoreline, toes sinking into damp sand, the wind tugging at my hair. I let the waves wash away any unease. For nearly an hour, I wandered, weightless. When I returned to the beach house, I expected to find Daniel waiting for me with that crooked grin. Instead, the sound of typing carried from the dining room. He was there, hunched over his laptop, glasses slipping down his nose, eyes fixed on a Zoom meeting. He barely looked up when I stepped inside. "Hey, you're back," he said, tone flat, fingers moving across the keys. My body went cold. What are you doing?" "Work," he said, like it was obvious. I swallowed hard, stomach twisting.
"Daniel, you didn't just meet me at the cafe."
His brow furrowed, finally tearing his gaze from the screen. "What cafe?" I let out a shaky laugh. Very funny. But then his face drained of color. He stared at me with a strange stillness, his lips parting. "Emily," he whispered. "What are you talking about?" I froze, every inch of my skin prickling. I knew what I'd seen. I knew who I'd kissed. And yet Daniel, the man I had trusted with my life, was sitting here, claiming he hadn't left this house at all. "Daniel, you were with me at the cafe, in the bathroom," I said, voice small but steady. Because if I sounded hysterical, maybe he'd admit it was a joke. His face went hard in a way I'd never seen before, like someone had slammed a door inside him. He stood up so fast the chair tipped and clattered to the floor. "Stay here," he snapped, too sharp. He grabbed his phone and barreled into the bedroom. The door closed with a bang that made my ribs vibrate. For a moment there was only the ocean in the distance and the heavy, rapid sounds of his breathing. Then I heard him. Words at first unintelligible, then a shout, then a voice dangerously close to breaking. "How the hell did you find us? No, you listen to me." And then a hard silence. He reappeared a minute later. His face had gone pale as a washed sheet, but his expression was terrifying in its calm. Too calm. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes and said, as if we were two people at a tourist trap, "Emily, why don't you run to the market? Grab some vegetables for dinner." Everything in me tightened. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. I walked out of the kitchen without another word and tried to steady myself on the boardwalk path that led to the little grocery. The salt air felt thin, and every laugh from a passing couple sounded like it belonged to someone else. I walked slow, counting my steps like a mantra, then returned 20 minutes later. Daniel was waiting in the living room with 2 wine glasses. He poured, handed me one, and smiled the way people smile when they're practicing. "Let's toast," he said softly. The glass was cool in my shaking hand. "I'm not drinking until you tell me what's going on," I said. My voice cracked. I didn't mean for it to, but it did. His jaw clenched. I could see the tension line his neck. "Emily, please," he said. "Just trust me." Before I could answer, a muffled sound came from the hallway, like someone dragging themselves, like the kind of noise you hear in nightmares when the world is trying to tell you something awful. I froze. "What was that?" I whispered. Daniel moved faster than I expected, like a spring coiled under his skin. "Nothing," he said too quickly. "Let's go out. Just the 2 of us." The sound came again, louder, closer. This time from the closet that stood between the kitchen and the guest room. It was a wet, choking noise. My feet were already moving before my brain caught up. I shoved past Daniel and yanked the closet door open. What I saw made a scream tear out of me before I could stop it. A man lay on the floor, bound at the wrists and ankles, a plastic bag over his head that bobbed with each shallow, terrified breath. His body jerked against the ropes with the small animal motions of someone trying to hold on. "Oh my God," I screamed. "Daniel, what the hell is this?" He lunged at me, hands like iron on my arms. His face was pleading, panicked. "Emily, listen to me. We have to leave. Now." "No." I ripped free because something violent and instinctive took over. Maternal, protective, stupid with fear. I grabbed the bag and tore it off. Time slowed into that cold, clinical clarity that comes right at the edge of collapse. The man beneath the bag coughed and gagged, and for a second I just stared, trying to make the world line up with the image in front of me. It was Daniel. The real Daniel. Blood on his lips, skin clammy, eyes wet and wild with shock. He tried to speak, voice raw and broken. "Emily!" His mouth worked. I whirled, every hair on my arm standing up. The man who had been with me at the cafe, the one who had kissed me in the stall, who had held me with that reckless, hungry energy, stood behind me. He looked like Daniel at a glance, the same jaw, the same slope of nose. But there was a manic animal glint in his eyes, a terrible looseness to his smile that made the image of my husband shudder inside me. "Twin," Daniel croaked suddenly, like a word ripped from a file. He coughed hard. Blood flecked his chin. My brother. My twin. The imposter moved before I could think. His hand was at my neck, breath hot, and smelled faintly of metal and stale coffee. "You should have come with me," he snarled into my ear. His grip tightened and my lungs buckled, burning with the frantic need for air. I kicked and clawed at him, nails finding cloth, then skin. Daniel thrashed at his ropes, hoarse with effort. "Let her go!" Daniel roared. The sound was animal and raw, and for a second it filled the room with a kind of desperate clarity. The man who'd taken my mornings dragged me toward the front door like someone dragging a sack. Pain flared along my ribs. Stars exploded at the edges of my vision. I tasted copper. I thought stupidly that I might black out. Then Daniel did something I can't explain. Maybe adrenaline, maybe the last reserve of a body that refuses to be erased. He snapped his bindings. I don't know how he managed it. One moment he was pinned and the next he lunged, smashing into his brother. The two of them collided with the kind of sound that makes you feel it in your teeth. Chairs toppled, a lamp shattered. They moved like mirrors of each other. Same reach, same speed. Only this was violence reflected back at itself. We crashed out onto the balcony. The night air hit me with the cold slap of salt and cliff spray. The men were rolling over the deck, grappling. The sound of wood splintering under their weight made my skin crawl. There was a sickening crack. The thud of a body hitting railing, a terrible hitch of noise that became a scream. The brother tumbled over, flailing, and vanished into the dark rocks and surf far below. For a long while I could only stare. Daniel stood on the balcony, chest heaving, blood streaking his temple and lip. He was breathing hard, like someone who had run from something worse than fear. When he turned to me, his face broke and he reached for me with shaking hands. I clung to his shirt as if to an anchor. What just happened?" I asked, my words fragile. Daniel's voice came out in a ragged whisper. "I'm so sorry, Em, I didn't know." He couldn't finish. Tears tracked down his face. "I didn't know they let him out. We called the police. They combed the cliffs all night until dawn smeared itself gray over the ocean. But there was no sign of a body, no trace where the brother had landed. To this day, I sleep with the lights on. Every creak in the house becomes a possible step, every shadow a mouth waiting to open. And sometimes, when Daniel reaches for me at 2 a.m. and his hand is warm in the dark, I feel that same wildness I'd felt in the cafe bathroom. It slips through the cracks of him like a chill. I listen to my own breath and wonder with a kind of small private terror. Was it really him, the man I married, or something that learned how to wear his face?